Hello, what's up guys? Welcome to another video. My name is Mindglowing and today we're gonna create a Plexus style tree. To start off, we need to create a tree, and the best way to create a low poly tree is to use the skin modifier. So we're gonna delete the default cube, get a plane, go to edit mode, press M on the keyboard and merge at center. In the modifiers, add a skin modifier, add a subdivision surface, and that's what we are going to start off with. I'm going to set this to 2, and now we can create a tree by extruding, and first off we're gonna create the base shape, and then we can make things bigger at a certain vertex. So let's just what I want to do is make it a little bit interesting. What I'm doing is just pressing E to extrude the entire time, and I can select a vertex and extrude it from here. What we want to do is, because right now I'm working in one direction, so I want to change it up a bit. And there we go. Just adding more branches to make it more interesting. There we go. And you can create your own kind of tree. It doesn't need to look like mine. Make it as unique as possible. And I think I'm quite satisfied with this. Just gonna add one more branch in here. And there we go. So now it looks very, it all has the same width, which we definitely don't want to. But if we press S to scale, that's not really what we want. What we can do is press Ctrl A and make it bigger. Because it's a bit rotated, I'm gonna add one more point. But that's not what I wanted. I'm gonna subdivide in here. And what I meant with subdividing, I pressed these 2 points and then pressed subdivide. That made this point, this vertex. Alright. So Control A for making the width bigger. And of course I want to make it smaller at the ends. I'm gonna extrude one more time. Alright. And just do this for the rest of the tree. Right, now we have our tree. We still need to add the leaves. What I did for the leaves is I added a plane. I went to edit mode, I pressed backslash key on the numpad to focus only on the plane and hide everything else. And I want to extrude this in the Z direction and then just rotate it. That's what I'm doing, making it a bit more interesting. And then rotate it again and make it smaller to the end. So we have some kind of bush structure. I'll do this at the bottom as well. I'll click the 3 button on the not on the numpad but on the keyboard to get into the face selection mode. Press E to extrude and rotate it. S for scaling. And there we go. I'm gonna add a subdivision modifier. The shortcut to do that is to use Control and one of the numbers. I used 2, but then changed to 1, so I could have used 1. All right. Now we want to add a decimate and make sure triangulate is selected. And then we have this nice low poly kind of bush. And we can, because it's looking very, it needs to be a bit fatter. So what I'm gonna do is S Shift Z for scaling it not in the Z direction. All right, that's all right. I'm gonna press the \num key to get back to everything else and hide everything. And I'm just gonna position this on top of the branches. What I want to do is duplicate it, but make sure that it is not the same. So what we can do is play with the decimate. We can also scale it in one direction. I chose the Z direction for this one, and it already looks quite different. So you can duplicate that one again, and we can rotate it, scale it in the Y direction this time. I'm going to rotate a bit more. Yeah, this looks fine. This looks nice. Shift D to duplicate. And then I'm going to scale some of these to make it look a bit different. Just do some random stuff to it so it doesn't look the same. This one is pretty far off that one. Oh, we have another branch here. I'm going to switch these so we can see that one. And there we go. And there we have it. A nice looking, interesting looking tree. So now we need our ground. We want to create some kind of rock structure. To do that, we can take a cylinder, scale it up, this is a bit too big. This looks nice. Scale it up in the Z direction. And then go to edit modes, select the face, and scale it so it looks like this. Alright, now we can go into sculpt mode. So we want to press Shift R to give it more geometry, so make it very small like this, and then press Ctrl R so it created more geometry. I'll show you into edit mode. So it created more geometry to work with. We go back to sculpt mode, we press G for grab, and then we make sure that it looks a bit like a rock structure. So what we're gonna do is just grab random stuff out. It doesn't really matter how it looks. Just make sure it does look like a cylinder. All I'm doing is grabbing it from the bottom to the top and pushing it inside, so it gives these interesting contours and lines. Now we have a little problem here, that is that we're working with some sharp edges. What we can do is smooth it out. To do that, you can use the smooth brush or keep pressing the shift key. When we're doing that, we can then grab the geometry out, and we're getting rid of these sharp edges. Very basic sculpting. So we're gonna do the same at the top. I'm just smoothing it out with the shift key. And if it's not really doing what you want, like the strength is not up enough, you can press the smooth brush and then adjust the strength here. Because if you're still in the grab tool, the strength is different. Like you're seeing here, the strength is 0.4 and the smooth brush is 0.7. So when I'm using the shift key here, it will use the 0.7 and not the 0.4 strength. Just something to keep in mind. Alright. I'm quite happy with what I have. Just gonna add a bit more depth. Alright, and I'm quite satisfied with the result. So let's go back into object mode, Control Tab for the menu, and let's add a decimate modifier and set it very low. I might need a second one for more control, so I'm gonna use 0.2 and another decimate. .1. Oh, that looks nice. Maybe a bit less. I'm gonna apply this decimate modifier. Alright, I think that looks nice. If you want, you can apply this decimate modifier as well. Okay, and all we have to do right now is go into geometry nodes. Alright, let's jump into geometry nodes. And we'll start off with all round. Alright, I've decided. Let's go. So first of all, we need all spheres. And our geometry setup is going to be quite similar as in the previous video. So we need a set position, and we need a UV sphere. sphere, of course. I'm gonna press Shift Tab, and I'm sorry, I forgot to enable these. So Shift Tab to get this, to get the snapping working, so it snaps instead of being totally free. Alright, we need an instance on points. And we're gonna plug in our UV sphere in the instance. So it's way too big. Make it very small. But what happened? Our rock is gone, so we need to add a join geometry and plug in our group input into the join geometry. So that now it's back and we see all these little spheres on every vertex, which is what we want. We just want them to connect, so add a line in between. To add lines, we need another set position. Before I'm going to do anything else, I'm going to add a frame to this and change this to spheres. I used F2 to change the name. Alright, let's plug this into the geometry. We need a mesh to curve. Plug the set position into the mesh. We need a curve to mesh. Plug in our curve. And we need a curve circle as our profile curve. And plug this into our join geometry. Again, it's way too big. It's still too big, so I'm going to add 0.5. Maybe a bit smaller. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. That looks good. So now we want to add a shader. So we going to set a material, set material. And we still need to create this. So let's create the shaders first. So I'm going to add a new material and call this emission. Bring in an emission node, change to rendered, and I'm gonna set this to 10. Of course, we're giving the rock some emission right now, but we'll remove that later. We want to give this to our UV spheres. Gonna set it to blue. I'm gonna add a bit of bloom so we can see the glow. It's too high, but let's change that later. Okay, so we can set our material here, emission, and I've set it to the lines, of course. So what we need to do is put it right here. And we're gonna do the same thing for our lines. But I want a second emission. So I'm going to add another emission and change the color slightly. Change it a bit to light blue-green and change the name to emission 2. So just gonna change it here. All right, we can see the difference already. Gonna add a nice frame with Control J, F2 to change the name. I'm just gonna set this to lines. And what we want to do is not light up every face, but just some random faces. So let's do that. We need a set material. We're gonna create new material first. And I'm going to set this to emission. I'm gonna pick a bit more green. Set this to 10 or 5. We can change it later. So we're gonna play with the bloom as well. Set the material. Oh, we didn't give it a proper name. So emission faces. Connect the geometry. We need a set position node. Plug it. We don't need a set position node. I'm sorry. What we need is a random value node. To get a selection. And change this to Boolean to get a probability, which we can set very low at 0.1, for example. Plug this in the selection, sorry, and connect it to the joint geometry. Because it already has all faces lit up, it's showing the random faces on top. So we need to add another material. Set this as the first material. And duplicate this, set it at the beginning, and set it to all new material which we created. Let's call this default. It's still showing everything, so let's go into edit mode, press A to select everything, and then press assign on the default, and there we have it. What we want to do is make sure that the colors are a bit different. So let's go back into our shader window and change the emission a bit to make a bit more blue. Like that, for example, and we can barely see our spheres, so let's make them a bit bigger. 0.03, that's too big. 2, let's pick 1.5. Alright, I like that. Let's add another frame. Random faces. And what we want to do right now is slap these geometry nodes on everything else, but they're gonna have a little bit of different parameters, because it's gonna be, you'll see in a second when we just add our geometry node here. You can't just add it like that. You need to click new, or if you don't want to do that and create a new geometry node tab, what you can do is add a modifier and click here geometry nodes, and then you can do that. So what our problem is right away is that all spheres are way too small. There's no way to see them, and we have another problem. The faces here are triangulated, and here they're just squares. So let's add another modifier. There's a triangulate one for that. And we need to add this before our geometry nodes. But if you think it's too dense, what you can do as well is just add a decimate modifier, which has the triangulate option. That's too much. That looks fine. And so our spheres are too small. So let's get back into our geometry nodes. We need to select our geometry nodes in the modifiers. Otherwise, you can, it's not going to show up in here. So we need to press this button here to make sure it's a different one, and make the spheres bigger. Or another way to do this, I'll show you, is we can keep it as one geometry node setup, and we can, let's just do that. We can add it to our group input. So what we're gonna do is we need the radius to change, connect it, go back to the tree, and here you can change it without changing the ground, and it's still the same geometry node setup. So if you change anything in there, it's gonna change for all of the objects that have these geometry nodes. Alright, so let's add the geometry nodes to the leaves or bushes. Okay, so again, the spheres are too small on this one, so let's make them bigger. The only problem with this, of course, is that the bushes need all to be the same, but we need to change them separately. I made them too big here. If I'm a bit smarter, I could have copied and pasted. Alright, if we zoom out, our lines of our bushes are way smaller than our ground. So we can add that to the group input as well. Set our radius here, connect it, and we can make the lines a bit bigger. And now I'm gonna be a bit smarter and copy paste. That looks good. Our tree is still too dense in my opinion. So what we can do is just change our subdivision, set it to 1, and that's way better. That looks exactly as we want. Our tree is very thin, so we can go into edit mode, press A, and then Control A to make everything a bit bigger or wider. It's not really bigger, it's wider. And more ground. There we go. As you can see, all light here touches all tree. So it's still all standard light that we didn't delete. So let's set up all lights. I'm gonna add this to a new collection by pressing M on the keyboard. Lights. I want to change the color to a bit greenish. Duplicate it. Make that 500. Make it blue, so it changes a bit. It changes things up a bit. There we go. And just add more lights. Change the color slightly every time. I think it looks really good. We just need to change our bloom settings because I think the radius is way too much right now. Yeah, that looks nicer. And let's change our world to completely black. Or we could just unplug it. It's like whatever you want. And there we have it, a nice low poly tree with a Plexus effect. And we can render this out. We can make an animation by using a noise texture, for example, and displacing the entire tree, which we learned in our previous video. Or just have a nice tree setup with the Plexus effect. You can use other objects, say for example a brain or a lock, and just add geometry nodes on top of it. We already have our group input, so all we need to do is change our radiuses here and everything is set up. I hope you learned something new today. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.